Hey everyone, Clay here. Just wanted to let you know that right now Badass has a new Patreon episode up where Sean and I talk all about the now officially announced White Knight Red Hood 2-issue miniseries that he and I have been working on. So if you want all the info on that, head over to patreon.com/thepenskyfile and check it out. Thanks for the support and enjoy the show. Hello, everyone. Welcome to BATTASS Beyond, the newest iteration of the BATTASS podcast, the Batman the Animated Series show podcast, where we talk about Batman the Animated Series, or in this case, Batman Beyond. My name is Clay McCormick, and with me, as always, is Sean Murphy. How you doing, Sean?
Yeah, man. Instead of going into a weird story about how my car isn't inspected, I actually would like to ask our viewers a favor. So the big announcement for me is Batman Beyond the White Knight #1 is out, or it'll be out as of this recording in about 4 days. And
It'll by the
there
time this
seems
comes out, Batman issue 1 will already be out.
okay. Well, there was sort of a kerfuffle at DC, and someone didn't market it properly, and our sales dropped by 40,000 units.
Whoa.
But right now, I'm just asking people if they could spread this word of mouth, if they like the book, if they have a friend that might like it, or if they can just let people know that this is out and that this is the third volume of White Knight. This is a big event. That would be helpful. If you can tweet it or whatever they can do in their hearts, I would appreciate that. I feel like White Knight started out as a grassroots movement,
Mm-hmm.
and through word of mouth, it seemed to be our biggest asset. And I wish that companies would do a better job of marketing and not drop the ball. But I'm in this predicament right now, and I'd like to get my sales back up to where they should be at about 80,000 units. So I'm asking people if they could retweet it or tell their friends or let people know that this is out. That would really be great.
Yeah, that would be excellent. And if you're listening to the show, chances are you're a fan of Batman Beyond, which is the one of the big focuses of this volume of Batman the White Knight. So I think you'll probably enjoy it.
It's almost like we planned this, man.
Well, with that in mind, stay tuned for Sean's rant over on Patreon. We have to. No, I'm just kidding. It'll be free. You won't have to pay for it.
Right.
But we actually will have a new Patreon episode out where we talk about another book that's coming out. Is the Red Hood book that you and I are working on. But you can head over to Patreon.
We're going to start marketing that pretty soon. We'll get you set up with interviews, and we'll do the official announcement. I know I've been teasing it like crazy, and you've been sort of hesitant about when to jump in, but your time is coming, my friend. Thank you for your patience.
Excellent. I've got my giant sunglasses ready, and I'm going to take a really pretentious author photo, and it'll be on all of my interviews. It'll be fantastic.
Is it going to be better than the Wicked Con photo of you where they caught you saying a long word mid-sentence?
That was my own
shroom haircut?
That was my own fault because they did ask me for a photo and I completely forgot to send one to them. And so you reap what you sow as far as that goes. But
yeah, man, you might want to get on that.
Yeah. Anyway, today we are talking about 2 episodes of Batman Beyond, Blackout and Golem. So we're going to take a quick break and then we're going to come back and talk about Blackout. All right, Blackout, directed by Dan Reba, written by Robert Goodman. And in this one, Terry, having just started to work for Bruce Wayne, faces off against Ink, a notorious shape-shifting mercenary who is sabotaging Foxteca, a company formed by Lucius Fox's son. We talked last episode about our both of our familiarities with Batman Beyond, or lack thereof in my case.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I do very clearly remember from this show is the character of Ink.
Right.
I didn't realize that she showed up so immediately, but I was glad to see her.
Yeah.
And this might be a tough episode to talk about as far as the episode itself, because it's a very slight episode. Not a lot really happens. It's pretty straightforward. It's basically kind of just a showcase for some amazing animation as far as Ink goes.
Yeah.
And I guess my biggest question is, how come Ink has never crossed over into anything else? She showed up in 4 episodes of Batman the Animated Series, and Batman Beyond, and 1 episode of Justice League Unlimited, which is the crossover episode with Batman Beyond. But she's never crossed over into comics outside of the Batman Beyond comics. She's a really cool character. She's like femme fatale Clayface, and I'm kind of surprised that she never made the leap.
Yeah, I have a theory about that that's probably not correct, but I kind of wondered the same thing. This episode feels like it's sort of it's what it's trying to do is set up the universe a bit more in a way that the first 2 episodes didn't. So we've got a better idea of what the Batcave looks like. We see that Bruce has kept the Grey Ghost costume and the Mr. Freeze gun, and I think this is the introduction to the Batmobile.
I honestly don't remember. Probably. I honestly can't remember.
Yeah.
It's definitely no. I'm sorry. The invisibility is the next episode, right? That's not this one.
Ooh,
I
don't know.
Yeah, I think the invisibility is Golem. I don't think it's Blackout. But
Yeah.
either way,
So
yes,
this one,
they're adding stuff to the world. Yeah.
yeah, like this one's burdened with like, well, we need to show viewers, like, we need to introduce the Batmobile. We need to introduce this. Like, Terry even says to Bruce, like, you gotta tell me more about some of these toys or something like that. So I feel like this episode's main goal is to set up the stuff around Batman and all the cool, like, Bill Finger type stuff, so to speak. And and it uses Ink as a means to an end, basically. And also sort of furthers the relationship between Bruce and Derek Powers to show how, arced they are towards each other. I didn't love this episode. I liked it well enough. I kind of wish they had done more. If they're going to really introduce the Batmobile, as a car guy, I really want to see like a better scene where this thing really is like showcased.
Right.
Like if at the beginning, Terry's like, what is that? And Bruce is like, you're not ready. And by the end of it, Terry has no choice but to like steal the car and use it, and he's really good at it.
Every episode of the first season is Bruce telling him he's not ready, and then Terry steals something.
You're not ready. You're not ready. Why are you even here, kid? Yeah. Maybe I went too far talking about that already. But what were your impressions here?
Yeah, I kind of felt the same way. I enjoyed it. Like I said, I really liked Ink. I did like the stuff with Bruce and Powers. Because I think that is definitely, coming off of the first 2 episodes, a central part of the story that they haven't fleshed out much at all. So seeing them flesh that stuff out was pretty good. I like the scene in the limo where his face starts falling off. That's always fun.
Yeah, the animation's really cool on that, like the glowy, flaky effects of the flesh. I can't imagine that was easy to do.
Yeah, and my favorite part of the entire episode, you might know where I'm going with this, is when they show how he gets his skin regenerated. Because if you're a longtime listener of the show, you'll
where you're going with this.
You'll recognize this machine as essentially the Terminator 2 fake skin toy playset that I've talked about in the past. It's almost exactly the same thing, where he lays down in like a Jello mold, and then they just pour fake skin on top of him, and then to hide his glowing endoskeleton. So, they could have repurposed a lot of those shitty toys and sold them as Batman Beyond playsets.
Maybe, man. I mean, they sort of did the same thing with Clayface back in an episode of the animated series.
Oh, that's
same
right.
Kind of like idea, like the human press.
Honestly,
instead of like pressing cookie dough or whatever, it's making humans.
Honestly, that's probably why we talked about it last time. That episode.
Yeah.
I'm always happy to see that thing make a comeback, because it's the worst toy I've ever owned. So.
Yeah, I always found the action figures for the animated series were kind of shitty because they didn't have very many points of articulation, so I never really collected them. The shapes were good, but no bending elbows and knees. What I would like to have seen as a kid is more upscale toys, so more expensive, more points of articulation. And if you had a play set of Derek Powers and you could like use Play-Doh or Silly Putty, whatever, to give him, and then have that flake effect, and it reveals this glowing, glow in the dark green skeleton underneath. Like, how fucking cool is that,
Yeah,
right?
that's pretty cool. Now,
But
everyone's
again, yeah,
parents would have hated that.
yeah. Any toy where you have to like buy refill canisters like slime and whatnot,
Hmm.
it's
Hmm.
probably like, yeah, it's like buying batteries for Game Boys. Just keep going bad,
But yeah,
but messier.
the action figures for Batman at this time, yeah, they were interesting because I have a couple of them, and
Yeah,
you're right. The shapes are good. Like they look
yeah,
very similar to the designs from the shows.
yeah.
But yeah, they've only got like the waist and shoulder articulation, so they can't really do a lot. But like I still have the second version of Mr. Freeze, where where his head comes off and he's got the spidery body. That one's a
That's the
pretty
only one I have too.
yeah, that's a pretty good toy for something that came out in the
Yeah,
late '90s. But I actually,
yeah.
now that I think about it, did they even make Batman Beyond toys? I actually don't know if they
Well,
did.
they
Look
do
it up.
they do now, but did they in the early 2000s? So I would have been in college. Still be in high school. I remember going to the Warner Brothers store in Boston, and I don't recall seeing any Beyond stuff, really.
It looks like they did, but I don't think they
They
made a ton of them. I just looked it up briefly.
Okay, cool.
It looks like they made Batman. Um, Possibly it's yeah, they did the Joker gang. So yeah, I guess they did some.
Right. I want to see these things. They've got to be just as shitty as Well, they're not shitty. They're just simple.
Yes,
Okay,
yeah.
yeah. There's definitely Batman Beyond. Wow, they really have a really thin waist, really broad shoulders. Can I just inject some politics here? I
Oh
am
boy.
annoyed that we have a lot of people who are like mad because we set unfair female body expectations through like Barbie and whatnot.
Uh
But there's all kinds of unfair body expectations for men as well. Like the reason I started working out when I was in fourth grade is because I was drawing Spider-Man, and I'm like, man, I don't want to look like a wimp. I feel like I should try to get into shape. Like I can't draw superheroes unless I try to get fit like one. And I
That's
thought
actually true. They don't
sorry,
let you. That's actually true. They don't let you draw superheroes unless you have the same physique as Spider-Man.
I, you know what? When I got into comics and I saw this artist I loved, and I'm like, well, clearly he's great at drawing women. He's got to be some kind of Don Juan with pencil, and there's no way that you know this much about female anatomy without going home with a
that's
lot of girls. And when
that's
I saw him with his gut and his like, he was wearing Lee denim jeans with like holes near
mm-hmm.
his ass crack, and I was really upset. And then I realized that most comic book artists don't, in fact, stay in shape.
Well, that's the dark secret. Is the reason that they're so good at drawing them is because they don't spend a lot of time with them. I,
Ah,
and that I think that encapsulates all of us. The time that we spent drawing when we were young was not spent
yeah,
hanging out with girls. So
yeah,
we had to
yep,
build them on the page.
yeah,
This is getting really creepy.
yeah. I'll relate to women through the ones that I draw in my own head. Not creepy at all,
Yeah, no, not at
Adam Hughes.
all. Yeah, but the I don't remember I think I probably aged out of the toys at this point, which is probably why I don't remember them. I honestly didn't really have any of the regular animated series toys either. I don't think.
Yeah,
But yeah, it does. This show still occupies a weird space for me because
hmm,
there's a lot of people who love it, but this is right at that point where I'm not really watching this stuff anymore. I'm
yeah,
still. Am I reading comics at this point? I think I probably am, but not as much as I was when I was a little
yeah,
bit younger.
yeah,
So I probably missed the toys and stuff,
yeah,
which is how they get you now. They wait till you're older and
yeah.
you have money to spend, and then they get you.
When I was my freshman year, I was in Boston at Mass College of Art, which was a really good school, relatively inexpensive, especially considering what schools charge now.
Hmm.
I was paying like 9,000 a year as an out-of-state student, which is amazing. And I had to pay extra for room and board because I was in the dorm across the street from whatever. They didn't have a comic book art program, and they
Hmm.
definitely looked down on comics, but you could tell that the bones were in place. This was a generally good school for most of the other majors, just not comics.
Yeah.
So I met a few friends Scott Montero is actually a guy that you know. He and I were
Oh yeah, I know
classmates
Scott.
together.
Yeah.
And he and I were the only ones that we knew who liked comics. So we would get on the T and go into the Warner Brothers store, and then we would hit all the comic book shops in the city. And at the time, I think there were like 4. We would hit. There was a manga anime shop, which was awesome, and everything there was expensive. We couldn't afford to buy anything, but like the statues were cool. There was, of course, Newbury Comics, which is worth hitting, and there were 2 shops, I think, in Harvard Square. There was one that was, yeah, I'm not even gonna remember it.
Was it
Do you know the one I'm talking about?
was it in a basement?
Yes.
That's Million Year Picnic. Great store.
Millionaire Picnic
Yep.
was one, and then there was New England Comics, which was around the corner, and yeah. So we would used to like get on the T on days off and just make the rounds and go see all the comic shops. And I remember not reading a lot back then, but that's when I started picking up Batman the Animated Series comics because they were only $1 and they were in, obviously the dollar bin.
Sure.
And it was the one thing I could read from Batman where like I didn't need to have read the first issue. I could just come to each issue cold and enjoy it for what it was.
Oh,
and I
yeah,
really got into that stuff.
Yeah, I think it's a thing that it seems to be undervalued to a certain extent in mainstream comics now. The ability to just kind of jump in, because I know we've talked about this stuff before, but like I don't read as many mainstream books as I used to, and anytime I try to dip back in, I always end up getting like the first issue of an event crossover and going, well, it looks great, but I have no idea what's going on, so I just don't buy the rest of them.
No, I buy like Pepe Larraz's books right now. And I
Right,
just,
yeah.
drool about the art, and I'm like, I have no fucking clue what's going on. Why is everyone dressed like they're in the 60s? I don't really care. I'm just buying it for the art. That's mostly as a reader. Most, like 90% of the books I've ever bought, I just bought it for the art.
Oh,
So
totally.
I was in
yeah.
it for the wrong reasons, you could say.
Well, I mean, it's important. It's the second lead of the art form.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it's. I think that they do a bit better in certain places. I really like the dollar comics that they do now a lot that are older books. Like you can go into the store and they have like the Marvel masterpieces and stuff that are like $1, and you can buy the first appearance of the Punisher or something like that.
Yeah.
Those are great.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's funny, like the best-selling X-Men books, it's basically still written by Chris Claremont, drawn by John Byrne. It's the stuff from the 80s and late 70s, 80s, and early 90s. On Amazon, that's still the number one X-Men stuff. But the industry has decided that Chris Claremont and John Byrne are dated and no one wants to read that stuff anymore. But it's like, if you're talking to Wednesday Warriors, that might seem like the case, but we make way more money through Amazon. And even though, Byrne might seem dated, he's not dated to most people on Amazon buying this stuff. In fact, that stuff's outselling a lot of the new shit. Like they got to get their heads. I'm already starting to complain. I'm skipping to the end of the podcast.
It's interesting you brought that up because this is something I was thinking about the other day, but I hadn't really verbalized to anybody yet. So I want to get your thoughts on this. Are comic books the only like entertainment career, like popular content career, where creators don't really have a second act like legacy run? So you got a band like Motley Crue, right? Motley Crue was huge in the 80s.
I like how we always go back to music.
Yeah, well, it's you could do it with movies and stuff too, but you've got Motley Crue huge in the 80s. Then they fall out of favor all through the 90s, but they stick around. They're just kind of doing their thing, and then all of a sudden, they're huge again with a certain audience in the 2000s because they're kind of on their legacy tour at this point. Which I know they would probably hate it if you said that, but I know all bands hate it when you say that. But I mean that's what's going on. Some of them embrace it more than others. Like AC/DC still putting albums out, but they're playing the same 15 songs they've been playing for 30 years. But you know what I mean, though? Like, movie stars have it where it's like, Liam Neeson, he had his big run in the early mid-90s, 80s through the 90s, where he was doing all the serious stuff. And now he's kind of doing action stuff and getting paid to do this stuff that people are coming, or Michael Keaton. Michael Keaton's doing all this kind of stuff. He's coming back to Batman now. He's playing the legacy card. I don't really feel like comics has that. A lot of these guys, I don't know if it's because of burnout or what, but we talked about this previously with Walt Simonson, where Walt Simonson can't get hired, and that's insane. And I think
Yeah,
maybe that was kind of the
yeah,
kernel of this thought for me, because I don't feel like you get a lot of legacy talent in comics who have a big second act, or even third act, if you want to call it that, where
yeah,
they kind of get a chance to really capitalize on all the goodwill they made when they were, in the peak of their career.
yeah. To readers, they would love it if you did suddenly a Thor run with Walt Simonson.
Mm.
You did a whole issue of splash pages. Like that shit would sell. No question. Problem is that the culture in Marvel is they tend to think of him as dated, and no one wants to take a chance on him
Mm-hmm.
and risk not making their numbers that quarter. They actually believe that this Walt Simonson is not worth hiring anymore, and it's like this guy is a record, like a trendsetter, and he's respected by most of the amazing artists you have today. All know that Walt Simonson is an artist. I don't know why editors convince themselves that artists like him are sort of finished.
Right.
It's insulting, and it's really annoying when one of these artists gets cancer or something, and the office decides, well, let's call him in, we'll do a photo op, and we'll make it like, yeah, how nice of you to do the right thing now when this person has a medical condition. Why don't you put his books back in fucking print and then give him more royalty checks again? Like, I feel like that's what would really be the smart thing here. But
Right.
we have a real bad, toxic culture in how we look at some of these people. Like, they'll call them dinosaurs or whatever. And like, when I found out Walt Simonson was available, I'm like, fuck, I need to get him on a White Knight book. Like, I
Yeah,
will
seriously.
remake this guy. I will force editors to accept that they've been thinking about this all wrong. And of course, this isn't every editor. This is just, a few bad apples. But yeah, I don't know why they get that shit stuck in their head. As far as legacy goes, that's a whole other podcast I'd love to talk with you about, because I think about creators who they sort of become the draw of whatever book they do. Like Mike Mignola, in a way, is a legacy character,
Mm-hmm.
creator.
Mm-hmm.
I'm buying whatever he does, period. I don't care what it is. He's more important to me than Batman in some ways, or Toth or Walt Simonson or whatever. And I feel like they will never be dated because they just have this thing. It's almost like let's bring it back to music again. Like a legacy band would be Aerosmith, you could argue,
Oh, sure.
or Led Zeppelin, and they do have their like big comeback, but most bands just flame out and disappear. And I wonder about the stages that your brain must, if you're, Steven Tyler, your band isn't as popular in the late 70s and you're thinking about quitting, but you hang in there until Run DMC gives you a second win. Like, what what does your therapist have to hear from you
Right.
from year to
Right.
year as you're having these breakdowns and suddenly you're hot again and sometimes you're not? You're wondering, like, if people just see you as a joke or do they want you to play the same old songs? It's got to be quite a mental trip, honestly. And I feel like the healthiest people who manage this are the ones who are just grounded and just thankful that people are still showing up.
Sure.
But then you seem to get guys like, Tommy Lee, who, they're very annoyed that they're being beaten by Kurt Cobain and don't know how to cope with it very well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So sorry, I know I sort of unloaded a lot on you right there, but I
No,
have a
no,
lot of
no.
feelings about this.
Yeah, no, I find it fascinating, because in comics,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if it's like you think about the guys who are still around. They're kind of the guys who have always been around, and I don't mean that detrimentally. I mean it's
Right.
amazing. Like, you've got John Romita Jr., who's
Yeah.
been working steadily for 30 years.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
McFarlane's still around. It's still an event anytime McFarlane draws something, because he's still around, but he
Right.
doesn't draw that often anymore. I mean, even Liefeld,
Yeah.
the Image guys are all kind of. I think those are probably the best example of sort of what I'm talking about in the positive
Yeah.
sense, where those guys
Yeah.
are kind of not as big as they were 30 years ago, but
Yeah.
they are still a big draw. Like Liefeld, say what you want about him, he was huge in the 90s, and he's still a draw. Jim Lee,
Cool.
absolutely still a draw,
If I could get a variant drawn by Rob Liefeld for White Knight, I would absolutely fucking do it.
Yeah,
It's
of course.
no brainer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or I asked Todd if he would do one for me, but he has this weird policy about working with Marvel and DC.
Hey, at least you shot your
Not a
shot, man.
surprise.
May as well try.
I mean, he's fine swooping in and making their action figures because he gets to own them in a way. And I
Right,
feel like
right.
that's how he's managed to justify it to himself. And yeah, but it's funny. I think like Mark, who's a writer who kind of went away and came back.
What era?
He came back with Spider-Man in like the 2010s. Well, another one is I think Dan Slott has been around for a while, and he kind of went away, and then he came back. I think John Burns had a couple comebacks. Frank Miller, I would
Miller's
argue,
a
had
big
a
one,
comeback with
yeah.
Dark Knight 2. And, his movie career was an unusual way for him to kind of come back in a different medium. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
yeah.
you're right. It doesn't happen as often as it does with musicians.
Yeah. And that's just a long way of me saying I think Walt Simon should draw an Ink comic. So talking about ink in this episode of Batman Beyond.
Okay.
Segue.
Bringing it back.
Yeah, this episode, it's fine. Like, I think the animation is fantastic. I think that all the ink stuff is really cool. I really like her as a character. But this had a lot of shades of the new Batman Adventures to me, where it was kind of wrapped up very quickly. I don't remember if we see Barbara. Do we see Barbara Gordon in the pilot? I honestly can't remember.
I was thinking that too, and I couldn't remember.
I'm not sure. I feel like we might not. But I don't want to. I'm probably wrong. But either way,
you keep talking. I'm gonna look that up.
She's in there briefly at the end as like, the introduction of the new Batman to the new Commissioner Gordon seems like it should have a little bit more screen time. It's just sort of like a tag at the end. They have a great fight in the Batcave, which takes up a lot of time, and again, amazing animation. But it's just sort of like a fight for fight's sake. Like the whole story of the episode is essentially Ink is working for Powers, doing industrial espionage on Fox Tekka, and then she goes after Batman because she's trying to kill Batman, and then they fight, and then Batman wins, and that's basically the whole episode.
Right. Yeah. So I don't think I've done enough. It's going to take a bit longer to figure this out, but I think that this might be her first appearance.
Yeah. Okay.
And if that's true, and I apologize for getting it wrong here, that's kind of disappointing because I feel like introducing her as Commissioner Gordon could be its own episode and really dive into what the heck happened. And you want to leave some mystery too, but she sort of gets a cameo in this, and that's really not good enough if this is her first appearance.
Yeah. I think you could do a whole episode, and maybe they do. Maybe they kind of dip into it later. But yeah, you would think that her first appearance would be a bit of a bigger, especially if she's, if she's the commissioner and stuff now. That's kind of a big deal.
Yeah. I'm not gonna find this now. I don't want to be dead air for you guys.
Looking on IMDb, it looks like she is not in the first episode.
Okay, we'll go with that then. Yeah, that's kind of mishandling it, honestly. I agree. Like, this does have that light, this kind of shallow feel of season 4 of the animated series. It's funny because the next episode for me feels a lot better. It feels like a smaller, like grounded episode could be seen as more mundane, but there's a lot more character building, and in that it like shows you the high school and what Terry's place is as far as the structure in high school and the bullies and all that. Like, I think the next episode was much better, and it felt like we're getting back to seasons 1 through 3 of Batman the animated series.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the next episode does have its own problems. It's not even really problems, but it's well, we'll get into it when we talk about that. But
yeah, sure. So I was gonna say, I think the reason Ink might not have done well in comics is because I think drawing her, I mean, animating her is cool because you can see how she liquefies and like goes over to a wall and seeps her form into the cracks and then expands and then destroys the building. To do that in a comic, you're going to need moment-to-moment storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, to show what she can do, you need like panel 1, you show her liquefy. Panel 2, she there's a puddle. Panel 3, the puddle seeps into the cracks in the ground. Puddle 4, it expands. Panel 5, like, I love moment-to-moment storytelling, but that's a lot of paper, panel space to spend on one gimmick of hers.
Yeah.
Now, the other argument I would say against what I'm saying now is it seems to work for Clayface,
Mm-hmm.
because you have the same problem. I mean, Clayface we all know him well enough where he can sort of just like change his hand into a giant knife or a bag of bricks, and we kind of know how it is. But I feel like it takes a certain type of artist to be able to do motion and moment-to-moment storytelling to make ink really work in sequential art. I think she lends herself to animation more than comics.
Yeah. I'm going to throw this out there. Beyond the White Knight spinoff.
Mm-hmm.
Ink, drawn by Trad Moore.
Oh yeah, he'd be perfect for that.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
I'd put him on ink. I'd put Daniel Warren Johnson on Clayface.
Hell yeah.
Or anything Daniel wants to do,
yeah,
honestly.
Literally whatever he wants to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, my other favorite part of this episode was I am a big fan of sci-fi sports in various sci-fi futuristic media. You've got my favorite television show, The Prisoner, has a really ridiculous sci-fi sport. I can't remember the name of it, but it's really silly. TNG has a fantastic sci-fi sport that they play it in the holodeck.
Yeah, it's Parisi Squares or
They wear like silly costumes when they do it, I think.
I forget what it was because there's a lot of fencing that goes on in there. You're not thinking of like the Frisbee Tube game where they're wearing headsets, are you?
No, I'm gonna have to look it up now. All of our Penske File listeners are screaming at me right now.
All right, you look it up, and I'll start talking about my rating and what I draw for this.
Yep.
All right. So what I would love to draw is I thought maybe I'd like to draw ink, but I also thought that actually might be kind of sucky because it could be an easy work day because you're just drawing a goopy woman. That sounds really awful all of a sudden. I apologize. There was a moment where she's choking Terry and forcing herself into his mouth. It did feel a little hentai at that point.
Yeah, that was intense. I thought he was dead.
Yeah. I liked Bruce wearing the Grey Ghost thing. That might be the image I'd want to draw.
Yep.
Is him retreating to cover his face, and he grabs the old costume. And like, I love Grey Ghost and I love Mr. Freeze, so I think that pinup would be really fun to do. I also like the fire truck at the beginning as it's kind of floating and shooting water and fire. But then I realized, wait a minute. To draw fire, you need to figure out what your texture is going to be. Same thing with smoke. You've got a water texture too. Most people aren't crazy about drawing machineries. I think most people's least favorite thing to draw in this would be a fire truck coming down from the heavens, shooting water into a burning building and it being cleared with smoke.
Yes.
That sounds like a nightmare for most artists. But at least you don't have to draw wheels.
Put it in 3-point perspective, and yes, it's every artist's nightmare.
Exactly.
I
think my rating. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say my rating for this I think is maybe a 3. And I think that's a little generous, but I feel bad for this episode because it clearly has some housekeeping to do, and it has to get through this stuff at some point. But I would like to have seen Barbara dressed separately and the Batmobile dressed separately and not have it all jammed in one.
Yeah, I think this for me is a 3, but just barely. I think it's a 3 on the back of the animation. Because it's, like I said, it's fine. They're kind of expanding stuff, but they're not really spending a lot of time doing that. It's a lot of action, which is fine. Like I said, I really like ink, so I think it's a 3 based on ink probably for me. I would probably want to draw.
Dying.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say I'm dying to hear the TNG thing.
Oh, don't worry.
I cannot remember.
You got it.
I
got it.
I didn't interrupt you. Go ahead.
I would probably draw. I would draw the scene where his face falls off in the limo. I
thought you might say that.
Yeah, that's some quality horror Batman stuff that I could probably sink my teeth into pretty well.
Or him in the human sandwich machine. The human.
Yes. Well, no. Then I gotta draw that machine and all the text. No, I just want to draw the face falling.
Oh.
What I was talking about in TNG is Ambu Jitsu, where they wear body armor that looks like a cross between BMX pads and like a samurai suit, and they fight with those like Q-tip bow staffs from American Gladiators.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. However,
Jitsu. Oh, I've seen it. Yeah, you're right. It definitely looks like an American Gladiators thing.
However,
Giant Q-tips. Yeah.
just for completion's sake, there's also a game called Velocity in Voyager. 7 of 9 fights The Rock in what seems to be a professional wrestling match, which I'm excited to watch that. And in Deep Space Nine, there's a game called Spring Ball. So there's plenty of futuristic sports in the Star Trek universe. But in this episode, I loved the anti-gravity high-lie scene.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I gotta say, there's a lot of interesting Ambujitsu fan art out there.
Oh, I bet.
It's like it's Riker fighting his dad, so it's a little creepy. But yeah. Anyway, I'm gonna just stop this thought right here.
Yeah, my only other thought about this episode was Derek Powers reminded me a little bit of Rutger Hauer from Batman Begins. He had that same sort of didn't you get the memo kind of energy when he was talking to Bruce.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I like how Powers isn't trying to pretend to be nice at all.
Right,
either,
yeah.
You know? It's like, oh, you're still alive? Don't worry. I don't worry about you, or whatever his line was.
Yeah, I do like that they are presenting him as a clear antagonist to Bruce, but they're also not explicitly saying why they hate each other. So they give you a little bit. They give you a lot, but they leave enough to the imagination where they give more places to go if they want to.
Powers taking over the company was an interesting thing to play with for my book because, I mean, I've always had this like political spin to the White Knight universe and local politics and how does funding even work. And Bruce giving away his fortune and having Powers hijack it somehow and leverage. He has a company called Wayne Motors that he takes over. It's not the entire Wayne company. It's just Wayne Motors. But he manages to finagle a way to start siphoning money off of what Bruce donated and turns Wayne Motors into a giant Wayne conglomerate. That was really fun to do. I feel like the bones were all here, and it was very easy for me to like White Knight-ify it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So a high 2. Yeah, I was thinking about a high 2 as well, or a low 3.
Yeah. I was just going to say, does Wayne Powers Motors in Beyond the White Knight make those sweet race cars, those sweet sports cars we see in the next episode again?
That might be the thing I want to draw is when that thing gets fucking destroyed.
Speaking of, I think we're done with Blackout. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to talk about Golem. Okay, Golem, directed by Butch Lukic. Jeez, been doing this for multiple years, and I still don't know how to pronounce that name. Written by Hilary J. Bader. And this one, Willie Watt, a high school nerd who has been picked on one too many times, steals a construction robot from his father to scare his chief tormentor, Nelson Nash. But when Batman tries to stop the robot, it becomes bonded to Willie mentally, giving him more power than he ever dreamed of in his life.
Golem?
What's that?
Sorry, I was just looking at where Golem comes from. It's in Jewish folklore, an image endowed with life. The term comes from the Bible in Psalms, blah, blah, blah. And I can't read these words. I didn't know that it came from Jewish folklore.
Yeah, it's
Golem.
There's a great X-Files. I remember it being great. I hope it's great. A great X-Files episode about a Golem. If I remember correctly, this is just me filtering this through the pop culture I've experienced it through, but it's essentially a Jewish folklore spirit of vengeance, essentially. So I believe you create out of clay the body of the monster, and then you bring it to life by putting this scroll with with special words in its mouth, and then you bring it to life. You send it out there to get justice against those who wronged you, and then you destroy it by taking the scroll out of its mouth. It's pretty cool.
It's kind of like the Bible even had supervillains in it, in a way.
Oh, totally, yeah.
Yeah. It's funny. The thing that killed Tasha Yar, is that a golem?
I don't think so. That's just a big muck monster with
It's just a big disaster of her
Yeah.
leaving the show before it got good.
a big muck monster that has my undying hatred for all of Star Trek. I maintain, man. I maintain Tasha had a lot of potential, but they just didn't wait it out. She jumped ship too early.
Yeah, I've been listening to Red Band. There's two guys that talk about Star Trek a lot and kind of rewrite things, and they make a lot of great points. It's interesting having them play in the background lately when I'm working. But anyway, we're talking about Batman.
We have a whole nother show we can talk about Star Trek if you want to, Sean.
I'm loving your Voyager stuff, but I cannot believe you guys are so positive on it. Because I feel like most people come into Voyager ready to just start hating on it because it's an easy target. But it's a good cleanser after Enterprise, I guess.
It really is. And I also was not super thrilled about having... There's always a bit of reluctance for me to start a new series after we've done a series for so long, especially with Star Trek, because traditionally the first couple seasons are always a slog. So you inevitably end up spending so much time doing one season, you get to the good stuff towards the end, and then it's over, and then you got to start another seven season show back at the bottom of the barrel. But I think coming off of Enterprise, Voyager just has just enough of the 90s Star Trek charm to it that it's really been working for me better than I thought it was going to.
Especially with the failed Picard and Discovery, it's like, oh my God, Star Trek used to be very simple to do. Like, why is it so hard to reproduce this these days?
Yeah.
But I want to do a podcast with you and Wes, so I'll save this for when I talk to you.
Yeah, please do.
People who are listening aren't listening. I don't want to hear about Voyager.
Well, and if you do, come over to the Penske File. Listen to us talk about Star Trek Voyager. Anyway, Golem.
Right, I like this episode. I thought it was great to give Terry some context. We get to see what kind of boyfriend he is, what kind of athlete he is, where he stands with the bullies, how he kind of has weight, social standing in the school. We get to see how kind his girlfriend is. He really does sort of feel more like a cooler version of Peter Parker in a lot of ways, where he could totally kick these people's asses, but he's dealing with it. He's measured in his response, you know?
Yeah. He's got, the first two episodes established him as a hothead. And they do a good job in this episode of playing him as a hothead who realizes he needs to keep his shit under control. Because now he works, because he's got Bruce in his ear all the time now. And so he's got Bruce basically telling him to cool it and not bring too much attention to himself and all that kind of stuff. And it works well, because he does end up in a sort of Peter Parker-y situation where he's got to keep his stuff under wraps. It is a little bit different because he is, like you said, he is cool, and Peter Parker has never been cool. But I think it works really well, especially in this one, because the villain has a common enemy with Terry in this Nash, or Nelson Nash, is that it? Nelson Nash? Yeah, Nelson Nash.
Who's the stand-in for Peter Parker's
Flash Thompson.
What's his name? Thank you. Yeah, the guy with the curly hair.
Voiced by Seth Green in this episode.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I remember Seth Green used to be everywhere, wasn't he?
Yeah, then just hunkering down at Robot Chicken and just making money, I guess.
Yeah, that kid didn't age for years. It's crazy how in a time machine he seems to be. I also like episodes that take a chance and focus on a character you never heard of and sort of make you care about a character very quickly. And this nerdy kid who's being picked on, whose dad is an alpha asshole, who doesn't want his son to be a wuss or whatever. And then this kid gets control of this like kind of over the top mecha and bonds with it. And in the end, he actually goes after his own father to try to kill him. And I was like, wow, this is really going all the way. Like I forgot that this episode pushed it this far. He even smashes a boat, and there's a couple of people on the boat. I don't know if they survive because you don't see them hitting the water per usual when people start falling all over the place in Gotham. And I like that his dad at the very end learned the very wrong lesson. Like even his son, after his son tried to kill him, dad's like, well, at least he's not a wuss anymore. Great character stuff in this. I'm a sucker for this in episodes like, the one with the stepdad and Batman the Animated Series where he's invisible and
kind
of taking a left turn.
Yeah, I really like this one. I feel like it is. So, as I kind of alluded to a few minutes ago when we were teasing this, I think this is a really good episode, but I think this episode is hampered by time because I think they do more with their time in this one than they did in the last one. Like, that's unfair to say because there's more. No, I guess there's a good amount of action in this. So I would say yes, it's a more well-rounded episode, but I think what's missing from this episode, stopping it from being a 5 for me, is like 10 more minutes where you get more with Willie and the robot, and they're kind of like bonding a little bit. You sort of like an Iron Giant situation, like an evil Iron Giant,
sure.
Because it kind of goes from 0 to 60 pretty quick. And he has this reaction when the robot gets destroyed as though like his best friend has been destroyed, which I like, but I think they could have milked that a bit more.
He didn't quite earn that emotional arc.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more pathos in there they could have tapped into, but I just don't know if they had the time to do it. Like, this actually reminded me a lot of an episode of, not a specific episode, but like a Buffy the Vampire Slayer episode, because it was sort of, it takes place at high school. There's the one high school person who is secretly the protector of blah, blah, blah. And then there's a student who gets this magical, or in this case, well, technically magical, there's no explanation for it, power that is a metaphor for a larger problem that this kid is having at school or with his personality, et cetera, et cetera. And it really kind of had that vibe to me, which I really like, because I think those stories can land really well when they're done well. But yeah, what was missing is just like maybe 10 more minutes, or maybe not even 10, maybe like 2 or 3 more scenes just to build out that relationship with Willie and the robot a bit more.
Yeah, I agree. It still moves kind of quick, but it hits more emotional moments than... This feels like the first normal episode of the series. I still prefer the 2-part opener because it's cool to see Bruce try to use a gun and not be able to handle it. Like, I would definitely introduce people to the opener before I would show them this one. But this feels like it's starting to normalize the whole series and get into its pace a bit.
Yeah, and I like also both of these episodes that they are producing new villains right from the jump. They're not really like, Ink is kind of like Clayface, but she's different enough that it doesn't feel like they're just ripping off Clayface. Although, I mean, they're kind of just ripping off Clayface, but it feels fresh anyway. It's
funny, later in the season, there's a character that looks like Clayface, but he's black with red lines on his face. It looks like a Bizarro Clayface, and they never really call attention to it. Yeah, he's made of lava or something like that. He's part of a superhero team. It's funny. I remember hearing that this series was designed. The villains were designed after Spider-Man villains, and I tried to find evidence of that online, and I didn't see anything. No interviews or anything popped up. I guess people might think that Ink is kind of like Sandman, and I don't know. I need more of the characters to be able to make the connections, but I don't know if that's true or not.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we've only seen 2, 3 if you count Blight. I mean, I guess you could say Derek Powers is very similar to Norman Osborn. I think we talked about that for a bit in the last episode. Yeah. But yeah, we'll have to keep that in mind as they start creating new villains to see if there's any closer analogs that we can see with Spider-Man.
Yeah. That might have been some dumb shit that some friend in college told me, and I never questioned it. And here I am regurgitating it like
one
an
of
asshole.
One of those pre-internet quote unquote facts that you learn about something that you later on find out is completely false. Yeah.
Like how Marilyn Manson was in Wonder Years.
Oh yeah, yeah, and he had that
you remember that one?
That rib surgery too.
That's right. I forgot about that one.
Yeah, but I think there's some cool stuff in this. I like it's the first invisibility.
If I was able to bend over and suck my own dick,
yes,
I don't think I would. Just gonna throw that in there right now.
You don't think what? I'm sorry. I didn't catch that. Would you like to say that again?
No, I'm good. Did you not hear me?
I think I figured. I didn't hear you, but I think I have an understanding of what you said.
I said, even if I was able to bend over and suck my own dick, I don't think I would. Right, everybody?
and you wonder why the sales are down.
Yeah. Clearly it's
because
of
this
my,
stuff is not in the book. If you put this great material in the book, people would. Anyway.
Did I stutter, Clay? I guess I did actually.
Yeah. I like I like the robot in this. I was saying the invisibility is cool. It's the first time you see the invisibility. I really like the way they do it. I couldn't remember how they did the invisibility, but it looks a lot like the animation they use for like the digital newscasters and stuff, where it's just like kind of like two solid colors.
Yeah, man, doing the invisibility in a comic is hard.
Yeah,
I ended up, I think in issue 2 of the book that's going to come out, it opens up with Terry using the invisibility, and I had to redraw those panels because I went into it without thinking how I was going to handle it and the blocking and like where are you going to see through him. And the trick was like you have to have something behind him that has a medium level of detail so you can see it pass through his highlights, and then you black out the other parts, and then you have the colorist sort of color hold everything. And it annoyed me because I did that. I started off at page 1, so I didn't quite hit it. And for the rest of issue 2, I was annoyed with page 1. So I felt like I got off on the wrong foot of the whole issue. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that happens to me all the time, yeah.
Yeah, like fucking up page 1 is the worst, honestly, because you're just carrying this baggage for the next month and a half. And then when you get to the next issue, you're like, all right, page 1, let's try to fix the mistakes we've been making and start off on the right foot.
Yeah. That's absolutely something that I would sit down and go, well, I mean, I can start on page 8 probably and just deal with this later. Yeah. And then I have to deal with it at the end when I'm running out of time, and that doesn't help. So yeah, it's better to sit down and do it, I guess. But
yeah, for sure.
I also really liked the robot design. The robot design actually reminded me a lot of a Mega Man character.
So funny you said that. Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, one of the mini bosses from I think it's Mega Man 2. I can't honestly remember, where it's a very similar look, top heavy body with like a single eye in the middle, and then it breaks into pieces that slide across the screen, and you get to like jump over the pieces and stuff.
You know, that would have been an amazing toy.
Yeah.
If you had this character featured more. I don't think this kid ever comes back, but he might.
Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah. I mean, he wouldn't be to scale, obviously. You'd have to have the kid be small, but like that robot with like the things that pop out of him and like the hammer armor and all that stuff, like that would have been really cool, but it's just not a major feature of the series.
I had a question about this robot. Does he at one point grow a flamethrower?
I thought it popped out of his shoulder.
Yeah, I couldn't tell if it was just if he always had a flamethrower, because it seemed like they did the sort of thing where they kind of do a close-up on the kid, and they have like energy crackle around his eyes or something, and then they show this flamethrower kind of extend out from the shoulder. So I couldn't tell if the robot always had a flamethrower, or if the kid was like manifesting a flamethrower out of the. I don't know.
Yeah. The real question here is, if you could grow a flamethrower out of your body, would you want to bend over and suck on it?
Great question.
Oh man, these are the jokes.
Yeah. Welcome. Thank you for everyone coming.
They're rolling their eyes.
If 50-50, honestly.
Yeah, probably. Hey, I actually put the question out to you last time, or to viewers. Do they enjoy when I go off on a tangent in the beginning or not? Did you get any feedback for that yet?
That's something I definitely did. I don't remember if I ever put anything out officially for that. Yeah. I feel like we've asked that question before, and the answer has come back that they do enjoy it.
Okay. Okay.
I actually no. Now that I'm thinking back, I think we did do some sort of a poll for that, and it was honestly a closer split than I thought it was going to be, where it was like 50% liked the comic talk, and 50% liked the show talk. So.
Yeah, I just meant the non sequiturs.
Oh, the non sequiturs.
People find those.
I can. Yeah. I'll put that out there as well and see what. I'll get back to you next episode.
Okay. I'd hate it if it was like 90% no, and I've just been wasting people's time. I mean, come on, that hen toy one, that was pretty good. Right?
That was, you were great once.
That and the most epic lyrics in rock and roll.
Yes, that actually has started quite a bit of debate, especially on Discord. That we went back
Yeah.
and forth for a while about that. That was an interesting conversation.
I'll bet you anyone who's heard that, anytime you hear Journey now for the rest of your life, you're going to think about this podcast.
Yeah, probably. I mean, you can't buy that publicity.
It's
Anyway,
definitely an earworm.
but yeah.
So, what would you? Sorry.
No, go ahead. What do you have a thing you draw or a rating for this?
Yeah.
It's weird
I'm
because I
tempted to
feel
go.
like we talked more about Ink, and there's more to talk
Yeah.
about in this one. But maybe
Yeah.
it's because Ink is kind of a, I don't even want to call it a misfire, but like a missed opportunity, I guess.
Yeah. That's the thing I noticed. I texted you recently. Because you and I have writers' brains,
Mm-hmm.
if we like a movie or don't like a movie, we kind of walk out thinking, what would I do to fix this? And if we can find a bunch of reasons how it could be better, our grade goes down. A lot of people who watch, experience any kind of medium, they're not actively looking on how they could improve it. They're just asking themselves if they had enjoyed it or not.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard for me to see something that's a B plus because I want to think of like, man, a few tweaks and this could have been an A plus. So I start giving it a worse grade and I stop appreciating how good it actually was.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think for me anyway. It depends. Like, there's a lot of stuff that I can overlook. If I think,
Yeah.
for me, I think it comes down to what's the best way to say this? There's the plot brain, and I think there's the feeling brain, and I don't think either one of them is more or less important or more or less valid.
Right.
But I don't know if they always work in tandem with each other. So I think there's a lot of stuff that I really like that if you really wanted to break it down on a plot level, probably doesn't hold up really well, but it kind of doesn't matter because the feeling works really well. And I think there's other stuff where maybe, I don't know, maybe they do have to work together because, like, I feel like if I were to watch something that was impeccably plotted but made me feel nothing, I don't know if I would like that. But if I watched
to me,
something that
would be
was...
like,
Go ahead.
that would be like Glengarry Glen Ross. That would be some technically perfect movies that I could not give a shit about because there's no feeling there.
That's a whole different... I would fundamentally disagree with that, but we can talk about that some other time.
It's a half-baked idea. I'm not married to what I just said, but yeah, we can talk about it later. I'm happy to be argued out of that.
But yeah, you know what I mean, though, right? Like, there's certain things. I think everything you're viewing or reading or whatever, you're kind of weighing these things as you go, and when you come away, you've kind of already made your decision about what matters and what doesn't matter.
Right.
I love... So I probably watch Dark Knight Rises more than I watch the other two. And I kind of do that anyway with stuff. Like, if there's like a franchise or something of popular movies, I tend to gravitate more towards the one I've seen less. So I know I've definitely talked about this somewhere. So, like, if I'm going to throw on Ghostbusters, I feel like I end up throwing on Ghostbusters 2 versus the first one. And I don't know why I do that. I don't know if it's because I know those less, or if there's... if my brain is just sort of like picking out the things that I do like or trying to analyze it without me really knowing it. But like, I find myself watching Dark Knight Rises more than I watch Dark Knight or Batman Begins. And I love maybe 50 to 60% of that movie, and the other 40% I think is not great at all. But for some reason, it doesn't really bother me because I really like that first 60%.
So I feel like when you and I don't agree on a movie, I feel like it's generally you like an underdog and you like a misunderstood movie, and you'll watch the third Dark Knight because it's the unpopular one. And the more you become obsessed with it, the more you start to want to defend it. and the more contrary you'll get, and you get stubborn and dig your heels in, which is also really fun. Uh, so I feel like you feel like it sounds like you're defending something harder than you actually are, even though you know it's not a great movie. Your defense of it sounds like you're defending it more than you are. If that I just said that
Well,
twice, but you know what I mean.
but like I don't know if I probably wouldn't really go to bat for that movie in a really substantial
Yeah, you
way.
did just say that. Yeah.
You know, like I there are things about it I'll go to bat for, but if we were to get into a conversation about what the best Christopher Nolan Batman movie is, I'm not saying Dark Knight Rises any day of the week,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
Um
And you have unique defenses of bad movies, which I think are interesting.
I have correct defenses of the good parts of bad movies. Let's put it that way.
Okay. Wow. All right. That might be the snobbiest thing you've ever said.
Yeah, it is.
Um,
But it's all to what I'm talking about, where it's like I think there's certain aspects that you, as a viewer, shut off, and certain aspects you don't shut off. Like, can you watch an episode of Star Trek that doesn't make sense technologically, but it makes sense emotionally? You know?
Yeah, and what you said is important. People react to movies one of two ways. Do they get a good feeling and a vibe? Like people, let's just talk about the Batman. A lot of people who like that movie, I think, are responding to the look of it and the mood of it, and how there was not any cringy parts of it. It seemed to flow well. It seemed pretty solid in its approach to how things looked visually. Plot wise, I think there's a couple things that movie sort of screwed up. And I'm a plot guy. For me, mood is easy because as an artist, I can just draw mood and it's pretty black and white. Like I agree that the second Nolan movie, the mood isn't quite there because Gotham just looks like Chicago, and they didn't really focus on that stuff. It was just too much of a real world Batman. If you like Batman mood, you're gonna prefer the Batman over the second Nolan movie. However, if you're a plot guy and you're really into writing and payoff and building structure and all that, the second Nolan is clearly like a better movie. Um, but it might not be the one people enjoy more, and that's totally fine. I'm guessing most people respond to movies like they respond to politicians. They get a feeling for it and a vibe, and they just sort of decide they judge their feelings based on that.
Yeah.
I think it's through being a writer and having special knowledge of plot breakdown that it makes it harder for us to digest bad movies sometimes, and we get caught up in the minutia that most viewers really don't give a shit about.
Yeah. Well, yes and no, because I mean I'm neck deep in season 2 of Star Trek Picard, and trust me, there are plenty of people who are getting hung up on a lot of the minutia of the plot. So.
Yeah. Well, the Star Trek crowd and Star Trek crowd tend to be technically minded people. I think you're getting they're looking deeper into smaller stuff to dunk on it, honestly, at this point.
Yeah.
The average Joe, probably, who doesn't really think that much about Star Wars or Star Trek, will be like, that was fun or that wasn't.
Sure,
And I'm going on with my life, you know?
Sure. Yeah.
But people who want to suss out, who are obsessed with this shit, those tend to be technical people who get furious that the second Star Wars, when they like light jumped the ship into another ship and destroyed it, and it's like, wait a minute, you had that ability this whole time and
Right,
you didn't use it on the Death Star.
Yeah. Star Wars, the gold standard of science, hard sci-fi and accurate physics.
I know. I know.
Anyway, did you say what you wanted to rate this one, or what you would want to draw?
I was leaning towards a 4, but I think I'm going to go like a high 3.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go. It's tough because we're so early. I want to get.
I know.
My first instinct is 4. I'm gonna stick with it. I'm gonna go with 4.
All right.
And I reserve the right to change my vote as we get deeper in and I see how things shake out for the season a bit more.
See, the next episode has Mr. Freeze in it, and I think it's gonna be a potential 5 for both of us.
Okay.
And I think it'll give you context of what the range is gonna be in the show. So
okay, all right,
yeah,
good to know. What would you want to draw on this?
I would redraw the stupid car that the bully drives around.
Yes.
I hate that design.
You got to draw it into your book. You have to.
Up Hot Wheel in the background.
You have to.
Oh man, I drew a few GoBots in there, and I don't think anyone's gonna notice them. But yeah, I should throw this in too. You're right.
If you find the GoBots in Batman White Knight, let us know, and we will send you a GIF of someone clapping that you found him.
All right.
I
What
would
about
I would draw the robot fight at the end. Like, I really liked that fight.
you?
I thought it was aside from the fact that they just start indiscriminately like throwing people off what looks to be a 200-foot pier into the water. I thought the robot fight was cool. Batman versus a giant robot is always fun. It looked like a robot I could draw without wanting to kill myself fairly quickly.
Yeah, you're right. It had the tech in Superman the animated series had a alien look to it, and I feel like that leaked over into the design sense of some of the tech in this series.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, definitely.
I don't know how to describe it. It's just usually like a circle on it somewhere
Yep.
with white zigzag lines penetrating through black shapes and
It's
rounded edges and
It's-
mushroom-shaped things here and there.
It's weird though,
Speaking
because
of-
like
never mind.
oh Jesus, it's weird though with this show because on the one hand you've got some really cool futuristic design stuff, but on the other hand you've got a lot of like really kind of stock sci-fi feeling stuff. Like, for as cool as the city is, the visor that he wears to control this thing is pretty kind of lame looking.
It looks like a VR headset from 1994.
Right. And his dad's like construction foreman uniform looks like something out of Flash Gordon.
Yeah. You know, I actually liked what his dad was wearing, but I agree with you at the same time. His
So
dad
yeah,
looks like a superhero.
it is a little bit interesting where they're meshing things design wise in the show so far.
I forgot to say this last episode. I don't like the Batmobile design in this series.
Mm-hmm.
I think they need to take a few more passes at it to make it more solid. It's two commas, basically. If you're looking at it from the side, it's like one comma and then an upside down comma jammed in the front of it.
Okay.
I get what they were going for, but I think the problem in the design of these shows is they design things that look great in 2D, and then when they realize they have to move these objects around, there's a lot of push and pull with the shapes, you know?
Yeah, I honestly...
When I was designing... Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I honestly never really cared for the Batmobile in this show, because I always thought it to be kind of amorphous.
Exactly.
And it didn't really have the iconic look that even the animated series one did.
Yeah, when I designed mine, and if you go online, you can find on my Instagram, you'll see the model I made. I kit bashed and created my own Beyond Batmobile, and I stuck with the general idea of it, but I added a lot more hard lines and tech to it. It's just I felt like there needed to be a lot of fixes to make it work, at least for me. Yeah, I don't know. It's designed by people that don't draw cars. There's a problem. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm looking at it now. I looked up some pictures, and it doesn't.
In some angles, it looks cool, but
Yeah.
then when you rotate it, it's like, ugh, the ass end of that thing is massive.
Yeah, it almost feels like, well, I guess if you flipped it around, it would just kind of look like a Star Trek thing with the nacelles in the back.
I mean, it's clearly trying to be Blade Runner-ish because it looks like it has the arms reaching forward like a spinner car.
Right,
and I
right.
like that. That's a good start, but yeah, I'm just not convinced of it. And I know that they are like, well, it's supposed to be kind of blobby. You're not supposed to really make it out. But when you see toys of this thing, each toy looks very different because there's a bunch of different ways to interpret the shape when you make it 3D. I mean, you look at like anything like any 3D program, or people will upload models of Batmobiles, and a lot of people make this one, and there are like wildly different interpretations of what this thing might actually look like.
Yeah. It does have that really cool interior, though, that feels like they lifted it right out of Dark Knight Returns, where it's all just red and black and just a bunch of hard angles
I went
and stuff.
back. That panel doesn't exist in red. Everyone forgets that the first time you see that in red is that episode
The
of
cartoon.
the animated series.
Yeah. Interesting.
That looks great. And I went back to look at The Dark Knight from Frank Miller in the 80s, and they kind of have that shot of Batman surrounded by tech, but it's colored like blue and gray, and it's not intense, and it should have been red. That's way better, obviously. But I feel like the that episode that you love, I love it too, rewrote our memory of what that panel actually looks like.
I believe it. It's like it's an iconic shot from that show.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
it's not even like the biggest panel on that page, but it's such a moment, you know?
Right. You know, I'm going to say something, I don't know if I've said this before, but I feel like it's a little bit controversial. I don't like red in my Batman. in Batman Beyond, I think it's fine,
Oh, man.
but I don't
Yeah.
like red in classic Batman. Like I feel like whenever they do the Batmobile in the comics now, like the windshield is always red or there's red highlights on the car, and I don't mind it in the '60s Batmobile, but I don't know, I just don't love it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I'm not sure how I feel about it.
Now, Fire, on the other hand.
Yeah. One thing that bugs me about this show is he's got the red on his chest, of course. If they do blue lighting, then that red turns into purple and blue.
Mm-hmm.
And it just doesn't feel strong to me. It's like a blue filter over everything just takes away the energy in some of these shots. It's like the opposite of firelit. If it's blue lit Batman, I'm turned off.
Oh, sure.
But I generally gravitate towards hot colors because I'm a car guy, hot rods, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like my colorist used to get annoyed with me because every time I designed a character, it would be red, orange, or yellow. Like, when am I going to get to use green, Sean? When am I going to get to use pink in this?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I design scenes. I'm like, all right, there's a lot of trees here, so shoot your load on green, Matt, because we're not going to see green a lot for a while. So get it all out of your system, buddy.
We got one shot that takes place during the day, use as much blue in the sky as you want, and then never use it again.
Yeah, because other than that, we're going back to red.
Yes. But yeah, I think that's going to do it for us. Thank you guys for listening, as always. If you'd like to help support the show, you can go over to patreon.com/thepensky-file, where you can find the episode we put out where Sean and I talk about the Batman. And we also have a new episode up this month where we talk about said Red Hood book that Sean and I have been working on. If you want to get the inside scoop before that comes out, and possibly before it's actually announced, that's the place to get it. Thank you.
Even just signing up for a month and just going through some of the greatest hits, then canceling, or hopefully you don't, you stick around. But I think there's enough content worth your $3.
Oh, yeah.
How much is it for a play?
There's 2 different levels. I believe it's $3 and $5. So, for $5 you get access to like 500 podcasts. So we've been around for a long time. But thank you guys for listening.
And I'm hopefully going to be appearing on Voyager pretty soon. So
yes,
stick around for
absolutely,
that.
absolutely. But yeah, thank you guys for listening. I keep trying to cut it out. You keep jumping on me. It's fine. Thank you guys for listening. We'll be back next time with Meltdown and Heroes. See you guys later.